Okay, so you want to own a submarine. Find a shipyard, hire the crew, watch the ocean open up beneath you. But here's the part that reframes everything. A submarine is the only vehicle on Earth where the purchase price is the smallest financial problem you will ever have with it. And it's also the only asset class in the world where the operating costs are classified. The market has fewer than a dozen buyers, and the thing you bought can be rendered completely worthless overnight by a single government decision made in a room you will never be allowed to enter. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how submarines are bought and sold, who actually owns them outside of navies, what it genuinely costs to keep one running, why the economics of military submarine production are unlike any other manufacturing business on the planet, and why the gap between what a submarine costs to build and what it costs to operate has bankrupted shipbuilders, defense contractors, and entire national procurement programs simultaneously. First, let's establish what we are actually talking about, because submarines come in categories that are so financially different from each other they barely deserve the same name. At the small end of the spectrum, a civilian research submersible, the kind universities and oceanographic institutions use to study deep-sea ecosystems, costs between $2 and $15 million, depending on depth rating and mission capability. For that money, you get a vehicle that can carry 2 to 4 people to depths of a few thousand meters, operates on battery power, requires a surface support ship to deploy it, and needs a specialized crew of engineers and pilots who are not easy to find or cheap to keep. The Alvin, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and famous for surveying the Titanic wreck, has been in continuous operation since 1964 and has undergone so many upgrades and refits over the decades that the cost of maintaining it has vastly exceeded its original construction price several times over. That pattern, where the lifetime operating cost dwarfs the purchase price, is not unique to Alvin. It is the fundamental economic reality of every submarine ever built. At the mid-range, private luxury submarines for ultra-high net worth individuals start at around $20 million for a small personal submarine capable of reaching modest depths with a handful of passengers in reasonable comfort. The companies that build these, outfits like Triton Submarines and U-Boat Works based in Europe, operate in a market so small and so specialized that their entire global customer base in any given year can be counted on 2 hands. A Triton model rated for 1,000 meters of depth, capable of carrying 3 passengers, runs approximately $35 to $50 million. The buyers are typically superyacht owners who want a submarine as a tender, meaning the yacht carries the submarine and deploys it near interesting dive sites around the world. The submarine itself becomes a line item in the operating budget of a vessel that already costs $5 to $10 million per year just to crew and maintain. At that level of wealth, a $50 million toy that costs $2 million a year to keep operational is not a financial decision. It is an aesthetic one. And then there are military submarines, which is where the economics become genuinely staggering and where the real story of what it costs to own a submarine actually lives. A modern nuclear-powered attack submarine, specifically the United States Navy's Virginia class, costs approximately $3.5 billion per unit at current contract prices. The United Kingdom's Astute-class attack submarine came in at approximately £1.6 billion per boat, though the program ran so far over budget and behind schedule that the eventual per-unit cost ballooned dramatically beyond original projections. Australia's planned acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines under the AUKUS agreement is currently estimated at between 260 and 368 billion Australian dollars for the program, depending on which phase of construction and whose cost estimates you believe. That range of uncertainty, over $100 billion wide, tells you something important about the economics of military submarine procurement. Nobody actually knows what these things will cost until they are already built, and by then, it is too late to make a different decision. So where does all the money go? Building a nuclear submarine is not like building any other vehicle. The engineering tolerances required for a hull that must withstand crushing pressure at depths of several hundred meters while housing a nuclear reactor and remaining acoustically silent enough to avoid detection are so extreme that they essentially require a manufacturing ecosystem built specifically for that purpose. In the United States, only 2 shipyards in the entire country are capable of building nuclear submarines: General Dynamics Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, and Huntington Ingalls Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. These are not interchangeable facilities. The specialized tooling, the workforce with the necessary clearances and training, the supply chains for nuclear components, the quality control systems that meet military specifications. All of it exists in exactly 2 places in the entire nation. If either yard has a production problem, there is no backup. If either yard loses skilled workers faster than it can train replacements, the entire submarine program slows down and the cost per unit increases automatically because the overhead stays fixed while the output drops. This is the structural reality of military submarine economics. The fixed cost of maintaining the industrial base capable of building these vessels is enormous and must be paid whether orders are flowing or not. During the 1990s, after the Cold War ended and submarine orders collapsed, Electric Boat laid off thousands of workers. When demand recovered in the 2000s and 2010s, the shipyard discovered it had lost institutional knowledge that could not be quickly rebuilt. Welders who had spent careers working on submarine hulls had retired or moved to other industries. Training their replacements from scratch took years, and during that window, the cost per boat increased. The lesson the defense industry learned, and has never unlearned, is that submarine production capacity is like a rare species. Once you let it decline below a critical threshold, recovery is slow, expensive, and never quite complete. The United Kingdom learned the same lesson more painfully. When the Astute-class program experienced delays and the workforce shrank between contract phases, BAE Systems' Barrow-in-Furness, the only shipyard in Britain capable of building nuclear submarines, had to retrain hundreds of specialist tradespeople from scratch. The per-unit cost of the Astute-class rose significantly beyond original estimates, and the delivery schedule stretched by years. Every country that has tried to build nuclear submarines has discovered the same thing at roughly the same point in the program. The learning curve is real, it is expensive, and it does not compress no matter how much money you throw at it. The operating costs are where the economics become genuinely surreal. A Virginia-class submarine costs approximately $50 to $70 million per year to operate, not counting crew salaries paid separately through the defense budget. That number covers maintenance, fuel for the nuclear reactor, which must be refueled roughly once in the vessel's lifetime, but involves a maintenance period that costs several $100 million on its own, consumables, spare parts, and the costs of the support infrastructure the vessel relies on wherever it is deployed. A nuclear submarine does not simply dock at a commercial pier and plug into shore power. It requires specialized facilities, specialized handling equipment for nuclear materials, cleared personnel at every maintenance step, and a logistics chain that follows it around the world. Crew costs add another layer that most people never factor in. A Virginia-class submarine carries a crew of approximately 135 officers and enlisted personnel. Training a nuclear-qualified submarine officer takes years and costs the Navy somewhere between $5 and $8 million per person when you account for the full pipeline from recruitment through qualification. A submarine commander with the experience to effectively employ a $3.5 billion vessel in a contested environment is one of the most expensively developed human assets in the United States military. The attrition of submarine crews, the people who complete training and then leave for the private sector where nuclear expertise commands extraordinary compensation, is one of the persistent personnel cost problems the Navy has never fully solved. Commercial nuclear power plants, civilian defense contractors, and consulting firms offering clearance-dependent work actively recruit submarine veterans the moment their service commitments expire. The Navy responds by offering retention bonuses, special duty pay, and accelerated promotion for submarine personnel, all of which increase the per-person cost of keeping the crew aboard. Now here is the part that makes submarine economics uniquely brutal compared to every other defense procurement category. A submarine becomes obsolete not through wear, but through adversary capability advancement. A Virginia-class submarine built today is designed to operate into the 2050s. By the time it reaches the end of its operational life, the acoustic detection technology, the torpedo capability, the sensor systems, and the communications infrastructure of potential adversaries will have changed in ways that cannot be fully anticipated today. Managing that obsolescence requires a continuous upgrade program that costs billions across the fleet's lifetime and is never optional. You cannot choose to skip the upgrade cycle and hope the submarine remains effective. In submarine warfare, a detected submarine is a dead submarine, and the line between undetected and detected moves constantly as adversary technology improves. The upgrade costs are not a maintenance expense, they are an existential requirement. The Virginia-class Payload Modification Program, which is retrofitting existing submarines with additional weapons capacity to meet Pacific operational demands, is adding costs to hulls that were already paid for and delivered. The Block 5 variant of the Virginia-class includes a new hull section, the Virginia Payload Module, that adds approximately $500 million to the per-unit price compared to earlier blocks. The submarine you buy today is not the submarine you will be operating in 15 years, because the submarine you will be operating in 15 years will have been substantially rebuilt in the meantime at considerable additional expense. So why do countries keep building them despite all of this? Because the strategic logic of submarine ownership is airtight in a way that no financial analysis can override. A nuclear-powered attack submarine is the only weapons platform on Earth that can be in any ocean in the world within days, remain completely undetectable for months, threaten any surface vessel or coastal target within its weapons range, and withdraw before any adversary can respond. There is no land-based system that replicates that capability. There is no air-based system that can match its endurance. A submarine fleet is not a line item in a defense budget. It is the foundation of a naval strategy, and withdrawing from that foundation changes the strategic calculus of every military decision a nation makes for decades afterward. Australia's decision to acquire nuclear submarines under AUKUS was driven entirely by this logic. The capability gap between what a conventional submarine can do and what a nuclear submarine can do, specifically the ability to remain submerged for months rather than days without surfacing, is so significant that the Australian government committed to a program whose cost uncertainty spans more than $100 billion rather than accept that gap. Japan, South Korea, and India have all made similar calculations and are at various stages of expanding or modernizing their own submarine fleets. China is currently building nuclear submarines at a pace that analysts describe as the fastest naval submarine expansion in modern history. The global submarine arms race is not a metaphor. It is a live procurement competition happening across 6 major naval powers simultaneously, and the financial stakes at the industry level, for shipyards, for component suppliers, for the defense electronics companies that build the sensor and weapons systems, are measured in the hundreds of billions of dollars over the coming 2 decades. 2 scenarios, real numbers. Scenario 1. A small nation decides to purchase 4 conventional diesel-electric submarines, the type that runs on batteries while submerged and must surface regularly to run its diesel engines. A modern example, like the German Type 212, comes in at roughly $700 million to $1 billion per boat. 4 boats runs $3 to $4 billion before you build the support infrastructure, train the crews, and establish the maintenance capability. Annual operating cost runs approximately 30 to 50 million per boat. Your annual submarine budget for 4 boats lands somewhere between $120 and $200 million per year before upgrades, before the mid-life refits that cost hundreds of millions each, and before the personnel pipeline required to keep the crews qualified. Scenario 2. You are the United States Navy and you need to increase Virginia-class production from 1.2 boats per year to 2 boats per year, the rate required to replace the aging Los Angeles-class submarines leaving service and meet strategic commitments in both the Pacific and Atlantic simultaneously. Achieving that production rate requires approximately $2.1 billion in shipyard infrastructure investment over 5 years, training thousands of additional workers, expanding the supply chain for nuclear components, and managing the transition without disrupting boats already under construction. The cost of accelerating submarine production by less than 1 boat per year is a multi-billion-dollar industrial program before you build a single additional submarine. And that acceleration, from 1.2 to 2 boats per year, is currently behind schedule. The submarine industrial base is producing at rates below target, and the shortfall compounds every year because the Los Angeles-class boats retiring from service are not being replaced at the pace the fleet strategy requires. The United States Navy is the most powerful submarine force in the world, and it is struggling to build submarines fast enough. That fact alone tells you everything about the economics of this business. If you do decide to get into the submarine business, whether as a national defense planner or as the eccentric billionaire who bought a Triton and now wants to know how deep the obsession goes, here is the most important rule. A submarine does not cost what it costs to buy. It costs what it costs to be everywhere it needs to be every day for 30 years, without surfacing when the adversary is watching. Everything else is just the price of the hull.